We'll now hear from State Water Resources Control Board again. Those are both working now. That was
oh, they weren't working?
Somebody up here pressed the button that mutes all the mics. I don't know who that might have been. Somebody did. Welcome back.
They come in handy some days.
Please proceed.
Great. Thank you very much. And with me is John Russell, who's the head of our Administrative Services Department. So glad he could join me. It's late, so I just want to address the items that you want addressed at this point. As I see it, what's left is the per diem request, the consolidations request, the site cleanup request, and the water rights permitting and licensing request. I got it right?
Yes, and we have received a request regarding some issues on issue number 2, the water rights permitting and licensing augmentation. So I'm going to suggest that we hold that item open to give a little additional time for discussion. So I think you can, hold your remarks to a minimum on.
On the water rights permitting and licensing, it's a little different. Okay, I'll try. I'm just going to forgive me if I say less than I should, but I'll just get it started, and then we can talk about anything that you're interested in talking about. On the per diem request, this request, as we said in our proposal, is to try and acknowledge the fact that the per diem, and I know there are other agencies that have a similar per diem, but that the per diem for our Regional Water Quality Control Board members has remained unchanged since 1989. Again, I know that's common to other boards, but it is one of the boards. There are boards and there are boards in terms of how much time is required. And they have a massive workload of very complicated things to do. We want them to go out. We want them to be prepared. We want them to meet, now that the ex parte rules have been changed and we can talk to people, we want them to talk to people, and it has been challenging to recruit people, particularly people of more modest economic means, to be able to take this job, to be able to convince their employers, if they have a full-time job somewhere, that they can be compensated somewhat for the time they spend away. And so to us it seemed important to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work they do, how difficult the preparation is, and the importance of dealing with stakeholders, to give some small acknowledgement to the days they spend in meetings, but also the time it takes to prepare.
Right, and I know Mr. Gordon had questions about that. He's not here. So I think I'll suggest on this item also that we hold it open,
okay,
so that you'll be able to have that communication directly with him. And then,
okay,
I have some thoughts as someone who sat on the Coastal Commission, where it's a similar, very low per diem. I wonder if it isn't time for us to look comprehensively at all the various boards and commissions and maybe come up with a singular policy, if that's even possible.
No, that could be good, because there are boards and there are boards, and the compensation varies. Some of them do get compensation as if they're a one-third time or a part. It's all over the lot, so it is worth a look. But we're just asking, obviously, on our own behalf, but I understand that. On consolidations, thank you for the authority that the legislature give us to use this tool in the appropriate circumstances. It's one, doesn't work everywhere, but there are a lot of conditions, a lot of things to be looked at in terms of where the likely candidates are of a small community system that can't make it work, that has a larger system that might be able to work, but a lot of things, rightly so, in the legislation to take off and consider and to really negotiate with the players and parties. There we're asking for 2.5 people. We thought we could do it with the staff we have, but it's a lot more work than we even anticipated, and we're asking for a modest staffing of 2.5 so that we might be able to do 5 of these a year. Again, a fairly modest request, but it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work dealing with the specifics of that particular community, not just the small community, but also the larger, it doesn't necessarily be larger, the more robust community. Having managed a local water agency, albeit on the public works side with contract agencies and working with other agencies, I actually have a lot of sympathy for how many issues can arise, and we want to be able to manage that opposed to having it drag out. On the site cleanup dollars, this is a mea culpa of sorts, well intended, but we thought in the last budget that with the great changes in SB 445, where we were finally getting a modest amount of money to be able to deal with orphan sites rather than being just kind of locked into only dealing with sites where we already knew where the potentially responsible parties who could pay our fees were, we actually weren't able to target the most important sites for communities. And because we had a certain level of effort in that particular arena and couldn't go further without it being fee-based, we thought we could just move the people over. So we didn't ask for more people last year. We thought we'd move people over. Well, what we found is that, particularly with the rebound in the economy, we actually do have people who can pay for it. Sometimes this is in the brownfields arena where a new person comes in and wants to be able to do cleanup so they can proceed with development, and now we don't have the bodies to be able to deal with that, which is a happy problem in the sense that the economy is improving, but we actually probably should have identified that as a possibility the last time, but we were actually trying to avoid asking for new positions, but we find we do need those positions, and we're asking for 17 for $2.4 million. And then the water rights permitting and licensing, which is somewhat different from what we talked about in the drought, and that we're not spending a lot of time, 7 people and 851. This is responding to the requests that water users have to update their permits or get new permits. It's been a seriously underfunded part of our operation. We've got really long backlogs on new permits, changes in permits and the like, and we actually are doing some very good work with our friends at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, but also working with farmers who actually want to be able to help protect fish where they are riparian water rights holders who don't have a right to store, but they need to get a permit to try and have an appropriate right in the winter so they can store a little bit so they're not all taking water at the same time fish need it. It's a wonderful movement, but there's a lot of work to be done in terms of dealing with the water rights on that side. Similarly, the work we did through the drought to come up with expedited permits for folks to be able to store water in wet years into groundwater basins requires a water rights permit. So we just have an increased workload, let alone a backlog, so that's why we're asking there. All right, that was hopefully brief enough, but then we can focus on whatever it is that you all want to talk about.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, did you have any questions?
I do.
Why, yes. He said you would.
Let me find my place.
Just for your edification, we're holding open the per diem item.
Okay.
So there'll be additional time to talk about that.
Okay, great.
Feel free to ask a question if you want, but and we're also holding open issue number 2, the water rights permitting and licensing augmentation, on the regular calendar.
Got it.
Issue 2 on the regular calendar.
Okay. So the question I do have relates to issue number 1, which is the site cleanup program augmentation, and asking for additional funding, and I'm wondering, if you get a little bit more information on current workload and how we're doing in this process.
Well, it's 2 things. It had the positions that had been working in this arena, and we have been in that. Do you have the?
Actually, never mind. Let me do something else.
All right.
I finally found my place.
Okay. Fine.
So it is actually, it was on the vote only issue on issue number 18 on vote only on public water system consolidations.
Yeah, sure.
That's the one we're requesting permanent positions and additional funding. I'd just like to get an update on, how many consolidations have occurred, what's the pipeline for consolidations. That would help me to understand, why we're looking at additional permanent positions, and whether I'm also interested in thinking about that at some point. Have we consolidated all that we can consolidate? Do we reach a point where we actually don't need permanent positions because we've finished the work?
I think we're a long way from that. I mean, I'd have to get back to you on the total number, because part of it involves investigating the circumstances of the small communities, what you're looking for is both the problem with the small community and a likely consolidate or tour, and you're trying to make a marriage that could work, that we could help also deal with the issues that are ticked off in the legislation of being able to pay for it, et cetera. And so I think we anticipate there are quite a few over time. I'm not going to say hundreds, but definitely 30 or 40, but who knows? We're not sure. It's part of what we need more staffing to be able to see. But we have a bunch on deck. We have a couple that we're actively working on right now in Tulare, both in Tulare, including our work with Porterville and East Porterville. And we've got on deck 7 that we've sent the pre-mandatory consolidation letters to that they have to respond to. So we have a pretty hefty workload, even just to do the first couple of tranches. And as I said before, I'm sorry, I don't want to, no, that's quite all right. You have a lot to do. It takes a lot of work. There are a lot of things to go through to find out, that having run an agency, there are times you have all these contracts, you have all kinds of different things, your liability, your boards, et cetera. It ends up being challenging to figure out what we're going to fund, what needs to take place, and staff is spending an awful lot of time, as they should, meeting with all of the players in the community. Sometimes it's the county, sometimes just the agency, sometimes it's the small community system, and it's incredibly time consuming. So we're finding with our existing staff we might be able to do 2 or 3 a year. With the additional staff, we'd get up to a whopping 5, which is not a huge number, but again, it's one of those things where this is one potential tool to deal with the horrendous problem of folks not having adequate drinking water. It is not going to be the right solution everywhere, so it is not an endless supply of opportunities, but I think we have plenty of them, and just the 2.5 will at least let us take care of the ones we know are on deck in the short term, as we all continue to work with you, as we've said before, on larger scale public policy decisions on how we're actually going to help get drinking water to the hundreds of thousands of folks we know don't have it.
Great, thank you. Satisfied my concern.
Any other questions?
Happy to talk about the ones on deck when you...
LAO comments?
Sean Martin with the Legislative Analyst's Office, and we've reviewed these 4 proposals. We don't have any issues to raise.
Thank you. Department of Finance? Public comment?
Robert Gore from the Gualco Group on behalf of our clients, the Modesto Irrigation District, Kings River Conservation, Kern County Water, Imperial Irrigation, the wine grape growers, and our friends at the Western Growers. We appreciate the courtesy of the chair. You have our letter in recognition of the patience of your staff and the time. We'll continue to work with the Water Board on item number 2 and hope to make some progress. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Happy to.
So we have item 15 and 18 on the vote-only calendar that need to be voted upon, and then issue 1 on the items to be heard. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for reminding me.
Item 15.
Issue 15 we're holding open.
Holding open.
So it's only item 18.
Yeah, I would move the staff recommendation on vote only issue 18 for approval.
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Bloom.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Patterson. Bigelow.
That's out. And that takes us to issue number 1 on the items to be heard calendar.
On State Water Resource Control Board, issue number 1, I would move staff recommendation.
Second.
Second.
Let's vote.
Bloom.
Aye.
Gordon. Williams.
Aye.
Patterson. Patterson, aye. Bigelow. That item's out.
And issue number 2 is held open. So thank you very much,
Good, thank
Ms.
you.
Marcus and company. And we will now move on to, where are we here? California Conservation Corps. And much to my surprise, we may finish on time. Welcome. Why don't you go ahead and start, even while people are being resituated.
Thank you, Chair Bloom and committee members. Bruce Saito, the California Conservation Corps, and thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak here. I'll limit my comments because I know we need to move along here, but I will say that we agree with, for the most part, for the about the in terms of the LAO's comments about our residential program issues. Number one, our residential expansion programs. But I would like to just highlight some of our response to those, the LAO's recommendations. The residential centers, for a long time, I was racking my brains to figure out how our non-residential centers were not as good as our residential centers. But I've finally figured out that both have the highest of standards and both produce great work and both train and develop young folks, if not equally, at least on a similar par. So our argument now, or our persuasion now, is that both our non-residential centers and our residential centers are equally important, and that for many young folks that commute to and work out of a non-residential site, they can't participate or enroll in one of our residential sites because they're raising families, or for some reason or another they just can't get away from home. On the other hand, using the Napa site, which is proposed for $200,000 in this proposed budget to advance the search for a Napa site. That site 40 years ago, or nearly 40 years ago, was a residential site, and because of budget cutbacks in the last 20 years, we've changed it to a non-residential site. But there still remains a ton of resource conservation work there. But it's extremely challenging for our 45 Corps members that commute there every day from Vacaville or from Vallejo, long distances just getting to the work site that has, again, great needs. So we really believe that those residential sites continue to be important because they serve communities and project work that needs to be met and done. The second the point here is that we really believe those residential centers really go a long ways in nurturing the development of young folks. And again, some folks that are at our non-residential centers just quite frankly can't get to a residential center. So those residential centers, the current 7 residential centers that we have online, really provide services or opportunities for young folks, whether they're out of the foster care system or recently emancipated youth or young folks that just need to get away from their neighborhoods so they can establish some roots and develop some training and some career pathways. Those residential centers really serve in that capacity. My last comment here is at our Pomona Center. The Pomona Center is proposed for $100,000 again for site search in the governor's proposed budget. That is a slightly different example where we have a non-residential center at the Pomona site, currently at formerly of Latterman State Hospital, that's now moving over to Cal Poly Pomona. Of our 7 residential sites in California, 6 of them are in the north, and our one Southern California site is in Camarillo. So we really have a huge void of residential centers in Los Angeles County and south of Camarillo. So in this case, there's a high unemployment rate in the Inland Empire in Los Angeles County, so there's a great need to hire and train young folks in the CCC. And the Pomona Center is a great site to establish that residential center, so we can also fulfill the needs of the resource conservation and resource work that's readily available in the area. And then the last item that, again, I just want to comment on, the LAO's report said that, for an increase of 220 Corps members, this $170 million projected cost to build 5 new residential centers doesn't quite work out. For us, our math is that if there are about 200 young folks that typically go through a residential center each year, those 200 young folks multiplied times the 5 or 7 residential centers times the lifetime expectancy of that residential center of 50 years really equates to 70,000 or more young folks that would actually receive the services, as opposed to the 200 that would just be immediately affected by this increase in our residential centers. So that's just a minor point, but we're willing to, absolutely willing to, and open to working with the legislators, the committee members, and the LAO's office, Department of Finance, and others to really resolve or answer any other questions that there might be.
Great. LAO?
Sean Martin with the Legislative Analyst's Office. So the governor's 5-year infrastructure plan, it includes an expansion of the CCC Residential Center program. It proposes $171 million over the next 5 years from the general fund and lease revenue bonds to design and construct new CCC residential centers. This would be the complete design construction of 6 new residential centers by 2021, and then begin the acquisition and preliminary planning phases for 2 additional residential centers that would begin construction in 2021. By 2021, the total number of corps members would increase from 1,537 to 1,757, or by 220, which we view as a relatively modest increase. But also, the number of corps members who reside at residential centers would shift from 40% currently to 67%. So in our view, there's a policy shift here away from having the majority of your corps members in non-residential centers and moving them into residential centers. The decision about whether to take the initial steps on a major CCC residential center expansion, this is ultimately a policy call for the legislature. Our recommendations are to wait until there's more information on corps member outcomes before approving the acquisition phase for the new residential centers in Napa and Pomona. And by outcomes, we mean what are the outcomes that the residential center corps members achieve versus the corps members who are at the non-residential centers. And there is some information available on this. This could be information on employability after they complete the program and other measures. We believe the legislature should take steps to ensure that it has sufficient information to make this decision. We are recommending that you go ahead and approve the Ukiah acquisition for $100,000 to replace the current residential center at Ukiah. There is an existing center there, and it's uninhabitable. It doesn't meet building codes, and the Department of General Services won't renew the lease. We see this as just replacing an existing facility. With regards to the numbers that the department's giving you, yes, we would acknowledge that if you look at the number of corps members served over the life of the facilities, it would be a significantly higher number than the 220 number that we cited. However, we also note that there are other ways of increasing the amount of corps members without building these new residential centers.
Thank you, and pointing out that based on the partly on the LAO analysis and staff analysis, there's a recommendation to hold this item open. Do we have any questions from the dais? Any public comment? All right, well then, if there's no objection, we'll hold this item open and move on to, and thank you very much, Mr. Saito.
Thank you, Chair Bloom.
Yes. We'll move on to the Delta Stewardship Council. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Patrick Johnston, a member of the Delta Stewardship Council, and with me is our key staff to answer any of your questions about the budget. The budget proposal has a small increase in dollar amount for a small agency that the legislature created in 2009 to better get a handle on what we call the water system, but has many different parts, some of them interconnected, some not so well, some not at all. And so the legislature passed a law that said we have these co-equal goals that we ought to try and do together, and that's improve the reliability of the water system and also enhance and protect the delta, that key estuary that exists here. And so this modest budget on
I'm just
science.
going to cut you off and
Yeah.
move the proposal.
Okay.
Thank you.
LAO, any comments?
We didn't identify any concerns with
Department of Finance? Public comment?
Good morning. My name is Rosie Thompson. I'm with Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and we just wanted to offer our support for the $2.1 million in general fund dollars that would be used to bolster the Delta Science program.
Thank you. Was there anything essential that you wanted to add to your presentation, since we kind of cut you off in mid-sentence?
Appreciate the members' interest in moving the agenda.
All right. Thank you. Let's have a vote on this item. Did we have a second? I think so. Yeah. Mr. Gordon seconded.
Bloom.
Aye.
Gordon. Aye. Williams.
Aye.
Patterson. Bigelow. That item's out.
Great. We have some add-on votes to take care of before we adjourn. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
We split the vote on the first issue under the drought response.
Okay, this is the first item here is on the drought response funding. We split out the vote on the $5.4 million allocation.
Williams. Gordon. Aye. That item's 3-2. That's out.
We have Department of Water Resources issues 1, 2, and 3 collectively.
Gordon. Aye. Williams.
Aye.
Those issues are out. Issue number 4 and 5 under DWR.
Also under DWR issues 4 and 5.
Gordon. Aye. Williams.
Aye.
Those issues are out.
Department of Fish and Wildlife, we have issue number 1, the ivory sale and importation issue.
Gordon. Aye. That issue's out.
I think that's it.
We have a number of add-ons.
And then we have some add-ons.
We don't have to do those on the mic. Don't close the hearing. Yeah, okay. All right, so you want me to add yours on first?
Did you want me to notify the absent members? Do they need to?
Do you want? Okay.
What about Mr. Patterson? Yes.
Just FYI, we're notifying absent members. This could take a few minutes, but we won't be adjourning until after all of the voting takes place. There's no other business before we adjourn.